for me, in this year that I've been no contact, I feel more myself than I ever have. I feel like my relationships with my sibling, my friends, my partner are so healthy. I think also as an adult now with a new perspective, obviously, than I had throughout childhood, when I'm able to see the way that I am able to treat people despite my past traumas, it kind of validates those emotions in me where it's like, I'm sitting with this discomfort. I'm sitting with this grief, these different things that come up that trigger these insecurities or these intrusive thoughts. I'm going to do it because my life will be better and the lives of the people around me will be better. And I think when I'm able to recognize that and kind of make the distinction between myself and my parents where they could do this, but that's their choice.
We'll make it out and fall in love tonight.
On today's episode, we're chatting with Casey Smith, who you might know as Big Sis Casey on social media. She's a 27-year-old creator and the host of the It's Not Normal podcast. Casey, welcome. We're super, super excited to be chatting with you today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. So we're going to get right into it. A lot of what we talk about on this podcast is our healing journey and the experience that we've gone through. We center around the relationship, meaning our relationship and everything like that. But anytime, and this has been our experience, where we did a huge chunk of healing together in our relationship, but we found that the truth of it was really all of our past stuff prior to us even meeting that we really had to unpack. And that's where everything really started to, when I say open up, it's the truth. It's when everything really started to change and open up is when we started to focus and address on our own kind of individual healing paths, rather so much about what was going on in our relationship, because our relationship was just the place where everything was coming out.
Right.
And we had to really address and go towards our own stuff. And so I'm excited to hear about what you've been doing and what you've been kind of unpacking and processing. It sounds like it's been, 5, 6, 7 years that you've been kind of on this path to get to where you're at today?
Yeah. So I moved out of my parents' house when I was 21. So about 5.5 years ago now. And I would say moving out for me kind of marked a point in my life when I started to realize that things weren't entirely normal within my family and that there were other ways of having relationships and making connections with people than what I had grown accustomed to. And so that was kind of like my first inclination that, okay, maybe there's a life outside of this, but I was still completely naive to so much about mental health and emotional intelligence. I think I didn't develop that self-awareness, as I think a lot of kids of emotionally immature parents don't throughout childhood, because we're so preoccupied with how our parent is feeling and what are their emotions, how can I help them? And so we're sort of more attuned to everyone else around us and not ourselves. And so about a year ago, I got The Science of Stuck by Britt Frank, which was really sort of my launching point for my healing journey, because that was the first time that I was introduced to terms like triangulation, projection, parentification. And it was so eye-opening for me because I was like, this is describing my life. Like I resonate with all of this. And so from that point on, I just kind of took matters into my own hands and I started doing research about everything that sort of piqued my interest that I had a personal connection with. And so I would say really within the last year, that has been the most transformative time over the last 5 years because I've just been so into it. I think I've started to understand it on a much deeper level. But it is interesting what you were mentioning about kind of healing together. When I moved out with my parents, it sort of coincided with when I met my husband. And so many of the unhealthy behaviors that I picked up throughout childhood that I found that I was mimicking really kind of made their way to the surface in our relationship, because it was the first time that now I was looking for love and affection and attention from another person. And so all of these different behaviors were sort of manifesting themselves in this new relationship in my life. So it's definitely been a journey.
Yeah. It's been that's the way it's been for us. Like we were saying earlier, like I mentioned earlier, was so much of our stuff came out through our relationship. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, it was a lot of thinking that it was the relationship and that it was the other person. And that it was, my MO for a very long time was like, Stephanie's the problem. I got my together. I know what I'm doing. She's the one that has to figure out her stuff. And then as soon as she figures out her stuff, then we're going to have this nice, easy life together that's going to be super stress free, which was completely opposite of the truth. Like, it was so far from the truth. It's not even funny. It's not like I had so much stuff that I wasn't dealing with or that I wasn't even aware of. But I want to go back a little bit. Give us a little bit of understanding, like your family structure, your parents. Did you have siblings? Where did you grow up? I want to understand just a little bit more about where you came from.
Yeah. So I've got two siblings. I'm the middle child, the oldest daughter. And, I grew up in a very urban area. As far as my parents go, my dad, I think, is the one who displays more narcissistic tendencies. I think my mom tended to be more of an enabler. And I think throughout my childhood, in doing research about the golden child, on the surface, it kind of appeared that that was my role at times. But doing a little bit more research, I understood that a golden child can really never do any wrong in the eyes of a narcissistic parent. And so I think I sort of fluctuated between receiving some golden child treatment when I was in my parents' good graces, to then also being the scapegoat when it was convenient. And, for me, I think I started to realize that I was more of the scapegoat. I was being blamed for things as I got older, and I was looking for a bit more independence. In my late teens and my early 20s, it was just kind of a very natural progression, I think, of wanting to start my own life and to have a little bit more freedom, and freedom that I felt I had earned and, deserved throughout my childhood, being always very, obedient and respectful and honest. I was always hoping that my parents would trust me as I got older to kind of stand on my own 2 feet. But it seemed like the more I started to develop myself individually, the more intense the unhealthy behavior became on their part, where I was being blamed for things and everything would be a problem. And so that was kind of, I guess, the dynamic between myself and my parents for a while.
Sorry, babe, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
You could.
Okay, I was just going to bring it back just a little bit. You said at the beginning that where you wouldn't have had these descriptors, but what you started noticing was from the book. Remind me of the book again.
The Science of Stuck by Britt Frank.
The Science of Stuck. You said that that's the first time that you heard the terms like triangulation, projection, parentification. For somebody that's just listening to this and be like, okay, what are those? What does that mean? Would you mind getting into those just a little bit?
That's a great one. Let's get into triangulation, because that's one that I think is oftentimes not really, it goes under the radar. We don't, it's one that's kind of hard to see and navigate, even though it's kind of obvious once you see it.
Yeah, absolutely. So triangulation, as far as I know and what I've learned, it's basically talking about another person behind their back, sort of when they're not in the room, to someone else. And, this was kind of the root of one of my aha moments, understanding that I had trust issues. I had issues trusting other people and really feeling okay with that. Because throughout my childhood, my parent would consistently vent to me, not only about their problems, whether they were financial problems or personal problems, but also about problems within their relationship with my other parent. And so, I was very young and we would be having these very mature conversations, and he would just kind of be talking to me about things that in truth you should never speak to a child about, especially about their other parent. And that was one of the things when I realized when I first got into my relationship with my husband, when we would be apart, I was so fearful that whoever he was with, that they were saying bad things about me, that he didn't really want to be with me, that he was, all of these things were just kind of, it was intrusive thoughts. They were racking my brain. And it wasn't until I read about triangulation and I understood how that can make you feel throughout childhood, it made these insecurities in my adult life that much clearer. And so, yeah, essentially, I think triangulation is just sort of this intentional manipulation tactic that a narcissistic parent can sometimes use for their own benefit to kind of shape their child's opinion of another person for them. And that was definitely the case with me, where I felt compelled to share in my parents' opinions of other people.
Feeling every word of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can both relate to that one a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting too, because, and I'm sure you can probably relate to this in some way, but there's like, that's a really good example of really toxic behavior, or really, it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also something that when I say naturally, it's not like, oh, I came by it naturally, but I unconsciously repeated that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that, until I had awareness of it and actually saw that that's what was taking place and that that's what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Just like anything else, right? Awareness is the first step. But do you have anything like that where you see maybe you have awareness of something, and then it's easy to see it externally from yourself, and then the more processing and the more work and kind of the more sitting with it, you start to see some of these behaviors pop up in yourself and how they're manifesting?
Oh, absolutely. Like you said, awareness is the first step, and it really does give you so much clarity moving forward. Once I started to understand what these different things were, it was clear to me how I had been sort of subconsciously embodying some of those same behaviors, which can be a really uncomfortable feeling to sit with and to admit that within yourself, that you were treating someone that you care about in a way that you're no longer proud of now that you have this knowledge. But recognizing it is really important. And, going back to triangulation, I think a great example of that sometimes is, let's say you're dealing with a narcissistic parent and they don't want you to have a close relationship with your other parent. They can sort of say things to that other parent that you told them in confidence about them. It's this communication triangle to kind of divide two people. And so I remember early on in mine and my husband's relationship, I had such severe separation anxiety. I have a fear of abandonment. That was something that I learned along the line. And so I found myself kind of pointing out different negative aspects of my husband's friends. And it wasn't for a while that I realized the reason that I was doing that, I think, was to dissuade him from going out, from leaving me, essentially, because I was convinced that when we were apart, either something terrible was going to happen and we would never see each other again, or he was speaking poorly about me behind my back. I was so fearful, I think, and self-protective that was absolutely something that I did. And I don't even know if I was aware of it for a while. I think it was later on down the road that I started to realize there's nothing wrong with these people. These are good people, and yet I was nitpicking any little thing that I can find to sort of eliminate what I viewed as a threat, I guess, in my life.
So this is fascinating to me, because it's having awareness of an unconscious thing that's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you have awareness of it, because we get this question all the time from people where it's like, okay, great, I can, I recognize it now, but what do I do with it next?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I change this thing, especially when it's something that's happening kind of unconsciously and behind the scenes? So what have you been able to do? What does that process look like for you to kind of shift up that behavior?
Well, I think for me, so much of it has been knowledge. I think when you're dealing with any sort of healing from emotional abuse or manipulation, knowledge is power. Because once you can start to put words to these different feelings, you can understand where they're coming from. And I think even that, understanding that there is a why a lot of the time to your behavior, throughout my childhood, I didn't really understand that there was any sort of a distinction between myself and my emotions. I just felt like everything was happening to me, and this is the kind of person that I was. I was very set in my ways, I think. And as I've gotten older and I've started to understand more about mental health and trauma and the long-term effects that can have on you as an adult, I've been able to kind of trace back some of these different behaviors and triggers and understand them, so that now when they come up, I can recognize them. And I think recognizing triggers and understanding, being able to acknowledge your emotions is so helpful in learning how to manage them. But I also do think that, there are times when you can read about something and you can try to put these things into practice, but it's not until you experience something or you feel a certain emotion, or maybe that you've sort of lived a certain amount of life. I always compare it to sort of like a character in a video game that is silhouetted. You haven't unlocked them yet. And so it's like, that they're there, but you can't quite see all of their features. And then something happens and it's like, wow, okay, now I'm ready. I'm at this next level. I can see this for what it is and, sort of implement this into my life moving forward.
I love that metaphor.
Yeah.
I love that example. That one's good.
Thanks.
What is sorry, I hurt my leg. We're obsessed with pickleball right now.
Oh,
and
love it.
Yeah, we're playing it. I was going to say too much. We're definitely not playing it too much, but I cramped up on the courts today and it was like a killer cramp in my calf. Anyways, I'm complaining about an injury.
It's a rough one though.
You were
Cramp calves are no joke.
You were apologizing for an injury. You like
don't
hurt. You're
need
like,
to
I'm
do
sorry,
that.
and then you felt like you had to explain yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways,
apologizing like it's a reflex. I understand.
Yes. I want to go back to triangulation a little bit, just to give you a little bit of backstory. My mom was the big narcissist in my family. And it was something that I had zero awareness of, like complete zero awareness of up until just a few years ago. And one of the things that I've been able to go back and look at and kind of see and put together some of the pieces was not just the triangulation aspect of it, but very similar, where she was talking to me in a very negative light about my dad for essentially my whole entire life. But also once I became, 20 years old, 30 years old, kind of grew up and moved out of the house and was an adult, it was clear that she would also do it in regards to my siblings. And it was like suddenly part of me processing all of it has been, what relationship do I actually have with my siblings? And how is it based on reality, or how is it based on the filter with which she kind of ran everything through and fed me in a sense? Right. And so I wonder if you see any of that playing out with your siblings, or if you've been able to kind of maintain somewhat of a healthy relationship with them as well.
So I would say I have two pretty drastically different relationships with each of my siblings. I feel very fortunate that with one of them, we've both been able to start to heal together and have these difficult conversations, where we're directly communicating how we're feeling, we're respecting each other's boundaries, and it's been really positive. And unfortunately, with my other sibling, I've been no contact with them just about as long as I have with my parents. And I do think that a lot of that sort of stems from childhood. There were definitely sort of teams. There was a team dynamic within my house when I was growing up. And so I think that I was always sort of pitted against this sibling. I was always pitted against my other parent. And similarly with triangulation, there were a lot of things that were said to kind of persuade me to feel a certain way. I think lies were even told. There's a lot of mistrust that's kind of sown into relationships when you're dealing with a narcissistic parent, because at the end of the day, I think so much of what they do is for their own personal benefit, that they don't think about the repercussions or how this might be affecting their children's relationships for the rest of their lives. That's sort of inconsequential compared to how they're feeling. And so with that sibling, there really wasn't ever a strong relationship there. And I think we're just kind of on two completely different pages. And I think it can also be challenging when you grow up in an environment like that to start to see things for what they are. And I think that is kind of what happened with me over the course of the last 5.5 years or so. And I can't say the same for that sibling. So I think we're just kind of in different places. And I've talked to a few people online about this who have siblings, some siblings that are still kind of very much under their narcissistic parents' thumb. They're still kind of in that way of thinking. And, I don't hold any ill will toward my sibling. I think I hope for them to one day see things for what they are so that they can experience the world in a healthy way, but it's one of those unfortunate situations where if they're not willing to kind of put the work in, then sometimes it's best to just distance yourself, because you can't always heal the way that you need to while also maintaining a relationship with someone who's denying the existence of any of these things that are causing you grief.
Yeah. You mentioned going no contact with your parents. Has it been, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just a year, like your most recent episode, you were talking about it, right? Where it's just coming up on a year from having that or making that decision.
Yeah. It's just a little over a year now.
Okay. I went no contact with my mom 2 years ago.
Yeah.
2.5 years ago. I forget. It's been it's been just a little bit longer, but one of the things I wanted to ask you is because one of the really challenging parts for me as I kind of get further away from that time period, right? Further away from that date, further away from that moment where I made that decision, it's been really challenging for me to sit in the processing of all the different narratives and perspectives that I've kind of looked at over the course of that time period. So I begin to question myself as time gets longer and longer and further out, because there's so many different things. I mean, a lot of stuff was from childhood. There's still a lot of stuff that, was more recent and in adulthood and everything like that. But the big chunk of issues and problems and traumas and everything like that is from childhood. Mm-hmm. And so I start to question and doubt whether or not I made the right decision, question and doubt whether or not what my perspective is the right one. Because we're really big in but Steph and I both believe that your perception is obviously what is shaping your reality. Mm-hmm. And our perception has changed so much since we've known each other that it's like part of me is fearful that the perception that I have about what took place or what has happened isn't necessarily the right perception, or, it's inaccurate. It's wrong. I've made the wrong decision. I'm fearful, all of these kind of different things. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious to hear if you have experienced similar things or what your experience has been.
Yeah, I completely understand. I think the self-gaslighting in those moments is so real. When I've found myself so many times asking, was it that bad? Like, was I just born this way, and was I really difficult, and I made my parents this way? Like, all of these questions run through my mind when I reflect on my childhood and my decision to go no contact, all of these different things, even to start speaking about it, I think more publicly. And for me, I like to journal a lot, and I've journaled on and off probably since 2017. And so there have been a few things for me that no matter how much I doubt myself, I'm able to go back to sort of these key moments where the emotional manipulation was just undeniable, and I think for me, I think that can be something that's really helpful for people sometimes, to have like this practice of reassuring yourself. If you have sort of a moment or a conversation, something that really stood out to you that makes you feel grounded in your decision, I don't think there's any shame in revisiting that when you're feeling doubt because those decisions are so heavy. And I don't think that it's typically one that you imagine yourself making, whether it's, when you're in your 20s or much later in life, that you're not going to speak to your parents again, that you're going to distance yourself from your family. And so it can be so easy, to doubt yourself in those moments. But it's been helpful for me to have those key times that I go back to, and I remember, this was not okay. Like, this was kind of one part of a much bigger picture of what was going on. And I think also, like I said earlier, knowledge is power. The more you research these things and you start to connect the dots within your own life, it's like, I'm valid in this. This was my experience. People have written books about this. Like, it's not something that I'm making up in my head.
I love that idea of having some of those key moments that are kind of, because I have a bunch, and my goodness, hearing you articulate that and say that, I'm like, oh, I think in some ways that's what I was doing subconsciously, where it was like when I would start to doubt and question myself and the choices and decisions that I've made, then those moments would almost pop up in my brain, right? I would almost remember, like I remember the last time that I talked to her in person. Mm-hmm. And it was like an argument over something really insignificant and stupid. And it was me basically what felt like standing up for myself and articulating. I don't know if it was necessarily, quite to the edge of like saying a boundary or something like that. But essentially I was just standing up for myself. Mm-hmm. And her response was not good. Mm-hmm. And I look back at that and I remember that moment, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that's a really good example of, like you said, like the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. That's just one little snapshot. And so I like that. That's a really good tip.
Thank you. And, I think something else that's really helpful in those moments of self-doubt is as you continue to heal and you make this effort to kind of unlearn all of these unhealthy behaviors and to teach yourself new ones, like for me, in this year that I've been no contact, I feel more myself than I ever have. I feel like my relationships with my sibling, my friends, my partner are so healthy. And I think also as an adult now with a new perspective, obviously, than I had throughout childhood, when I'm able to see the way that I am able to treat people despite my past traumas, it kind of validates those emotions in me where it's like, I'm sitting with this discomfort. I'm sitting with this grief, and I'm, these different things that come up that trigger these insecurities or these intrusive thoughts. I'm going to do it because my life will be better and the lives of the people around me will be better. And I think when I'm able to recognize that and kind of make the distinction between myself and my parents, where they could do this, but that's their choice. I think that also kind of helps me to feel grounded because it's like, I feel great. The people around me are doing well. And like, I'm moving in the right direction, I guess. And it's such a new feeling for me, I think, to just have that freedom and that space to get to know myself and to try and to fail and to try again without judgment. So I think sometimes just sitting in that space is motivation enough to kind of keep moving forward in that direction, doing what you need to do to heal.
I love that you bring that up, Casey.
Thank
I
you.
think because we talk all the time about doing, like, choosing the harder thing, right?
Mhm.
You choose your hard.
Yeah.
You can either struggle in life and have everything, big issues and arguments and, conflict and chaos. That's hard. We did that kind of life for a really long time. And then it became time to start making these other decisions about going towards the discomfort and sitting in the emotionality of it all and letting everything come up that needed to come up and rise to the surface. And it's hard. I mean, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? It's incredibly difficult and challenging, even though oftentimes it's just feeling. So if you haven't heard yet, we picked up pickleball and we're having a blast. It's super, super fun. And if you haven't started playing yet, I hope that you do soon. And if you do, we want to help you by avoiding what we did. See, when we started playing pickleball, we just went on Amazon and found some paddles that looked cool. Little did we know, but they actually were hurting our pickleball game and holding us back from being the absolute best pickleball players that we could be. And when we found out that there was a pickleball paddle company here in Tennessee, actually not too far from where we live, we got super excited. Element 6 was started by a couple of brothers who were passionate about the sport and decided to go in and make their own paddles because they needed something that served their purposes a little bit better. Lucky for us, they're now sponsoring the podcast. And I can tell you from experience that their paddles definitely make a difference. The very first time I picked up their paddle and just held it in my hand, I knew I was going to be a better pickleball player as soon as I started playing with it. And it turns out I totally am. They have paddles for everybody, for the beginner, the intermediate, and the pro level. Head over to our website, stephandcraig.co, and click on the link for E6 pickleball paddles. I highly recommend their brand new one, the Torrent, which is what we play with. When you're ready to buy, make sure to use the code Steph and Craig. Not only will you save 10%, but the guys over at E6 are also going to send you out a free gift along with your order. So pick up pickleball, pick up a new paddle from Element 6. We hope to see you on the court soon. Not too long ago, I went down the rabbit hole of trying to find us some new clothes that didn't have all sorts of toxic stuff in them. I was tired of wearing synthetic material when I worked out, when I did things like jiu-jitsu and yard work and hiking and everything like that, because it wasn't really breathable and it started to stink a lot as well. Well, lucky for me, I found Woolly clothing. Woolly uses natural merino wool, and I'm a huge fan. All of their clothes are super soft and they feel really, really good next to your skin. Their clothes are naturally moisture repellent, so when you're wearing them and working out, it almost feels like it's cooling you off. They're also odor resistant, so they don't stink after you wear them. They have a great line of men and women's clothing, and if you've never tried merino wool, I highly recommend Woolly. I've got their boxers on right now. Every episode of the podcast, I wear one of their V-neck shirts. I'm really excited for where the weather starts to change and it starts to cool off a little bit, because then I get to put on my Woolly hoodie again. Head over to our website at stephandcraig.co and click on the link for Woolly. And when you're ready to check out, be sure to use the code Steph and Craig. You'll save 15% on your order. Show them some love and get yourself a great pair of merino wool socks or underwear, or boxers, shirts, pants, shorts, tank tops, workout gear, you name it. Wooly has it, right? It's just literally an emotion that needs to come up and be expressed. But I'm glad that you said that, because I don't think people understand. It's like society does its own thing when it comes to this kind of programming and story behind, the emotions that are safe to feel and not to feel and all of these other kind of stuff, all this other kind of stuff. But going towards the hard things and being able to sit in the hard things and to continually do it, like you said, life gets easier, life gets better, relationships across the board improve. And I think it's amazing. Like, we're at that stage with our healing where that's kind of what it's starting to look like, where, oh, wait a minute. I think we would both agree that we are more ourselves today than we ever have before. And we're in our 40s, right? Like, it's kind of sad to think that I spent 40 plus years not really knowing who this guy was, right? And I know Steph can relate to that. She didn't know who this guy was either.
That can be such a hard thing to reconcile, for sure. And, I'm 27, and I think for a long time, something that I had a hard time with was, I guess, sort of like my high school years, my teenage years, comparing them to my peers and just kind of the freedom that you have. I think once I was in my early 20s and I moved out of my parents' house, I was sort of thrust into adulthood, where now all of a sudden I had all of these responsibilities that I had never had before and I didn't know how to manage. And it kind of made me reflect on this time where it was like, this was your time to be stupid and to try things and to have fun and not worry about paying your bills every month, And I think for me, that took a while to reconcile, because I was like, I'm never going to get to be 16 again. I'm never going to get to go and just do those things. But it's again, going towards that discomfort and allowing yourself to feel that and to sit with it and to move on.
Yeah. So with everything that you're going through and finding, like, reconnecting with yourself and being the self that your truest self, when you started the relationship with your husband and you had all of these old behaviors and these old patterns that are coming up, as you're shifting through, how are you navigating allowing yourself to change? Because there's the part where sometimes it's, I know it can feel, at least for me, that if I change, you're not going to love me. You're not going to like me. And so now I'm changing. And are you still going to like me? Is it safe to change? Do I get to be me? Even though you're fighting for it so hard and you won't stop, it's still really, really scary to show up as a new version of yourself so many times.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, growing up in that kind of environment also, I think narcissistic and emotionally immature parents can be so resistant to change, where I always felt like if I expressed an opinion about something once, that had to be my stance from now until forever. Even if I learned something new or I had an experience that changed my mind, I had to stick with it. So there was always a lot of pressure in the things that I would say or showing up in a certain way, and I didn't feel that freedom to change. But I was so lucky that my husband was so patient and understanding, and that he would also kind of hold me accountable for these unhealthy behaviors, which was so uncomfortable for me, because coming from, I had a very enmeshed relationship with my narcissistic parent. And so my main priority always was, what can I do to make you feel better, to make you happy, to make sure nothing is going wrong? And so when I would be feeling upset about, maybe I was feeling insecure, I was, this deep-seated feeling was kind of coming up and I didn't know how to handle it. And I was expressing these things and expecting unhealthy behavior from my partner. When he wouldn't just give in and give that to me, I was like, why are you not trying to make me feel better? Do you not care about me? Do you not love me? Because in my mind, that is what I had done for my parent. It's like, if you love someone, you'll do anything for them. And my view of what that was very skewed. And so it was such an overwhelming process of sort of deconstructing everything that I thought I knew, because I thought that I was this person, that I held these certain beliefs, and this was just the way that I was. But I think it became clear to me over time that so much of what I was feeling and how I was reacting was fear. It was based in fear of something bad happening, whether it was an argument or me getting punished or disconnection with my partner, that when he would meet me with patience and understanding and he wouldn't leave, he wouldn't go away, it wouldn't kind of linger for days or weeks on end, I started to realize that this was a safe space for change. And that was really helpful, I think, in addition to learning how to directly communicate, because that was something that I was never taught. It was, you kind of had to pretend like nothing was ever wrong, ever. And so now to be in a place where I can say, hey, that thing that you said earlier really kind of hurt my feelings. So can we talk about this? Or maybe can you not say that moving forward, and have that be okay, was incredible, you know? And I started to feel like it was safe for me to change and to adapt, and I guess to, yeah, start to discover myself in these new ways, because I knew now that mine and my husband's relationship, it wasn't transactional. You know, it was unconditional. And I think that that is a really big difference between a healthy relationship and an unhealthy relationship.
Okay, so we had this moment 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I don't remember how long ago it was, but it was the awareness that we're in a safe enough relationship. It's not even that we're in a safe enough relationship at this point. It's like we had this moment. Do you remember what I'm trying to describe, babe? I'm going to butcher it, but
I'm
it was.
sorry, I don't.
You let me down.
No, I know. Once you say it, I'm going to be like, because I feel like it's right there, but I don't have it right now.
But it was this awareness of like,
we're safe enough to be sloppy.
No, it was the feeling of having somebody apologize to you.
Oh, yeah. Ooh.
Because it was like, we do this type of work all the time where we're helping each other heal and process. And it's also like a level of an emotional maturity that we each have to kind of embody and practice. And part of that is accountability and acknowledging like, you're right. Like what I said was hurtful, and I'm very sorry for that. And I apologize for this. And, you know, the corrective process from a healthy perspective, and somebody actually apologizing to you and like meaning it, and then having their actions change after the fact. We just had awareness. I mean, it's something that we've been practicing for years, and we keep getting better and better and better at it. But it was like this light bulb moment where it was like, oh, that actually, not only does it feel really good, but there was a part of me that, because it was Steph doing it. Steph apologized to me for something. Or did I apologize to you? Who knows, Casey? Somebody was apologizing.
Yep. Someone was saying sorry.
Exactly. And I had awareness in my body of how scared I was, because it was so hard to trust the apology. Like it was really strange to be in this moment where it was like, oh, I don't know what to do, because somebody was accountable, and like somebody was an actual mature adult and was able to sit with me through this process and not get angry, not shut down, not tell me to, you know, go to my room or leave or whatever. Right. Yeah. It was just this really loving experience, and it was beautiful and uncomfortable. Like it was interesting to kind of feel the dynamic of it. And I was like, oh, I didn't have a whole lot. Neither of us had a whole lot of like, you know, apologizing going on growing up.
Or at least a accountable apologizing going on.
Right.
Yeah. It was I'm sorry that that you feel that way. I'm sorry that I'm such a terrible person, or it's because of this happened to me, and now you have to caretake them instead of, you're like, wait a minute, my feelings. Yeah. We had all the other ways, all those other fun things. So it's definitely been a journey to understand what to do with your body when somebody is accountable with you. You're just like, oh, okay, is this safe?
You know, even on the flip side of that, because similar to what you guys described, I grew up with very little apologies. There was no real reconciliation. Let's make amends. Let's move forward. And I remember, I don't think I'll ever forget it, the first time that I apologized to my husband. We had like a little bit of a disagreement, and it was obvious that I was in the wrong. I was behaving the wrong way. But up until that point, in light of any kind of controversy, I would always get so defensive, because that was kind of the way that I had to survive when I was younger. I had to pick a point and I had to stick to it, even if I was wrong, because me apologizing was me admitting fault. And then that was used against me. And so I remember just coming to this point and being like, I can't deny this anymore. And so I went up to my husband and I was like, hey, you know, I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. And I was so hesitant and uncomfortable. And he was like, it's okay. Thank you. When I tell you my jaw hit the floor, I was like, is that it? And he was like, yeah, thank you. I was shocked that I could admit fault, admit my own wrongdoing, and that wouldn't become part of my personality. That wouldn't be something that was held over me for weeks or months whenever it was convenient for the other person. And it's such, I think, forgiveness, both giving it and receiving it, really allows you to let go of emotions and disagreements, because you can kind of process them. And like you said, when you're in a healthy relationship and you apologize, you make amends, that's typically followed by action, by an effort to change your behavior or your words so that the other person sees that, hey, I know that I did the wrong thing. I'm going to really try to not do that again. But I think, when you're a child and you have a narcissistic parent, I think they thrive on chaos and uncertainty. And so everything is kind of always up for grabs. And if there's anything, even if it was from a few years ago, that they can use to make their case or to do this, they'll use it. It's not really a safe space. And making that adjustment, kind of like you said, it was beautiful but uncomfortable.
I wanted to ask you earlier, you were talking about, I don't actually remember, I don't remember exactly the words that you were saying that triggered this for me, but one of the things that we've had to unpack is, and I know there's a term for it, I don't remember exactly what the term is, but it's kind of like this group think, where your family unit will have a mentality and a thought process about everything, right? About from like where the garbage goes in the kitchen, what we do after dinner, how we, all of these kind of like traditions / routines / programming that your family will have, that as a child you are then programmed with. So then that's how you see the world and think about the world. And a big chunk of what's been happening for me is not just unpacking all of that, but seeing how that relates to what I think of as my personality or how I process or how I view things. Because a lot of that groupthink was based around trauma, and it was based around toxicity, and it was based around emotionally immature parents that, didn't know how to do things properly. And so am I describing that right? I know that there's a term for it.
There is.
Can you remember what it is?
It's like that. The group think, I think, is the best way to say it. I don't know if that was it or not. It was like this. I think it is group think.
I think
you're
it
now.
is.
Well, we're going with
do you know what we're
group
talking
think.
about, Casey?
Well, I did read about a closed family system, which I think is similar, where it's kind of like, things within the family stay within the family, and, outside perspectives or opinions aren't necessarily welcomed, especially if they don't benefit.
Yeah, but it's even like, exactly. And it's along those lines where it's like, for example, the way that your parents would view somebody else in the community or something like that. Now you see that person that way, right? The story that your parents have about your, not your extra family, what's your bigger family, like
your
aunts,
extended.
uncles, your extended family, right? All of those stories about your extended family and about your life, you're seeing it through this lens. And oftentimes, especially if there's a narcissist involved or those really immature, emotionally immature parents, you're getting a very skewed perspective of it. And it starts to shape and mold how you think about yourself in relation to the world and all those kind of things. And so that group think, that the closed family unit, I wish I could remember the actual term, not that it matters. But what I've had to recognize is it feels like a slippery slope to me, where sometimes I'm replacing that group think with just the stuff between Stephanie and I, because we will do the same thing, where we have this same type of thought process about other people in our life. And Stephanie might see this person a certain way, and I have to see that person that way now. Otherwise, there'll be tension between us. And, it's just everything. It's literally like moving together through life as a unit. We have to be on the same page about everything. And if we're not on the same page about everything, then there's something wrong. And that's not true. That's not the case, obviously, right? But that differentiation between yourself and the family unit or your relationship, what does that look like for you?
Well, I definitely understand, the idea of moving through life together. And for me, something that I started to realize, because sometimes, Brandon and I would have a conversation about something, and it would kind of come down to, let's agree to disagree, because it was similar to what you were describing. We don't have to view this thing differently. But I think a lot of the discomfort for me in that came from feeling like I was misunderstood, like there was going to be some disconnection there. Like I needed you to at least see the reason behind what I was saying. You know, I think any kind of a difference in opinion felt very unsafe to me. But something that's been helpful is realizing that in the same way that I've had my entire life and an infinite number of experiences that have shaped me and the way that I perceive the world, the same is true for everyone else. And so just because I view a person a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that a friend of mine or a partner of mine needs to view them that same way either, because their lens is completely unique and different from my own. And that doesn't necessarily translate to any disconnection within your own relationship, which it can be hard to convince yourself of, I think, in the beginning. And I think going back to that group think mentality, one of the most challenging things for me, even still, I would say, is that there was kind of this idea throughout my entire childhood that was consistently reinforced that if we can't do something together, then we shouldn't do it at all. Like one of us shouldn't go and do this thing, especially if someone else wants to be involved. And that, I think, for me was a really difficult thing to unlearn as I got older, because I started to feel like I couldn't do anything on my own. And if my partner or a friend wanted to go and do something without me, then that meant that they didn't care about me. Because, you know, why would you go and do this thing if I want to do it too? It didn't seem fair. But that was, I mean, there's so much of that groupthink mentality when you're raised in an environment like that, whether it's your sort of foundational beliefs and the way that you think you should live your life, to, like you said, the opinions of extended family members, immediate family members sometimes too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's say I've used the word interesting a lot with that. Mm-hmm. Interesting point of view. Interesting, because so much of it, I feel like I would navigate, like my first default was, that's how you think, that's how I have to think, otherwise I'm not safe. Mm-hmm. So it was a real push. And then there were times that it was definitely like, wait a minute, like I think we should think the way I think. I think the way, like, I think it should be my way of thinking now. I think it's time. So to try and find the balance of that, it's interesting is what I tell myself a lot. And I say it outside, like out loud, I guess, outside of my own head.
You go outside and say it sometimes.
I do.
Too.
I'm like, interesting.
Very interesting.
Right. And just realizing how different point of views, and it was a very like right or wrong mentality that I had to. And it was either right or wrong. Either I was agreeing with you and you were right, or if I disagreed, then I was wrong, or vice versa. And instead, like, it took a lot of time to really see the different perspectives of like, we're having an experience together and we each have our own perspective. So of course we're going to have our own opinions. Of course we're going to have our own like perspectives of that, how we're going to share. So it's interesting when it's so different. It's like, oh, interesting. Now it's like this fascinating thing of like, that's what you took from that. I was over here with this. And instead of it being a conflict, it's like, man, that's interesting. That's kind of cool how that can happen. Obviously, sometimes I'm like, interesting.
Yeah.
You know, there's still, it's not 100%, but interesting's been a word where I found the peace in that and allowed more separation.
That's awesome.
Casey, going no contact is a really big decision to make. And it comes with a lot of ramifications after the fact, right? What are some of the things that you've experienced since that maybe you didn't have awareness of, or, you know, surprises, both good and bad, that have come since that decision?
So, you know, before I decided to go no contact, basically through a letter. I wrote my parents a letter, and I tried to keep it very open-ended, where it was like, you know, I'm not saying that I'm never going to speak to you again, but the next time that we do talk, it has to be about something substantial. You know, we have to at least be on the same page so that we can go on and not pretend like everything is fine. And so I left it very open-ended. And leading up to that, for me, this was just kind of a personal thing that I felt like I had to do to feel okay after this. I tried and I gave a few more opportunities than I'm sure a lot of people would say that I should have, just to see like, well, okay, what about this time? If we do this, maybe things will start to go. nope. Okay. Once I felt comfortable enough in that, where I was like, I have done everything that I can do, I felt kind of confident moving forward in that direction. And I think, probably the most uncomfortable thing that I've encountered since then is extended family events where we're going to be in the same room, maybe at the same table. Um, and I think just sitting with that discomfort can be really challenging, and also feeling, even just on a subconscious level, like other people in your family or your friend group might look to you as the reason that things are different now, because on the surface I'm the one who moved out, I'm the one who made the change. I don't think a lot of people in my family are aware of like these underlying issues, and I think being okay with maybe being viewed by that by some other people has been something that I've thought about. But I will say in the last year, it's been really mainly positive. Um, so much of I think I've had so much space for self-discovery. And really just getting to know myself. I think I started to realize how much I was always kind of catering my words and my behavior to whoever it was that I was around. And I actually just had an experience this past weekend where I was with a handful of people from kind of different groups in my life. And I caught myself in the moment thinking, like, I'm just being me right now. I'm not playing to this group dynamic or to that group dynamic, because I don't think I'm doing that much anymore. I think I always felt so compelled to kind of cater myself to someone else to make sure that I was agreeable or that I was making them happy. I was aware of what version of myself kind of meshed well with them. And I think allowing myself the space to kind of get to know myself and feel confident that, I don't have to people please everyone. And if someone doesn't like me, then that's okay. I don't have to cater myself and my behavior to everyone that I'm around. It's exhausting and it's unsustainable. And I'll never truly be able to get to know myself. And so I think that's been a really positive change in the last year, is just kind of feeling like I can be me all the time.
That's awesome. Looking for the perfect gift for someone that you love? Try thinking beyond the material things and get them the most unique, unforgettable gift possible. A custom song from Songfinch. Songfinch lets you create an original studio quality song inspired by your own life and the ones you love. It's completely unique, personal to you and your story, and will last a lifetime. Songfinch walks you through an easy 4-step process to create your original song. Just tell them who the song's for, provide some personal details about your story, and let them know the type of song that you want. Then pick your favorite Songfinch artist, or get matched with one. They'll write, record, and produce your custom song in just 4 to 7 days. Head over to our website. It's stephandcraig.co and click on the link for Songfinch. When it comes time for checkout, use the code Steph and Craig. You're going to save $20 off your order. Once you get your custom song, be sure to tag us because we want to hear it. We're probably a lot like you, where we had some pans that had been kicking around our kitchen since we met, actually. They're over a decade old, and it was time for them to go. Lucky for us, we found Heritage Still. Heritage Still offers premium cookware that's made right here in the USA. It's actually made here in our backyard in Tennessee. We ditched our old pans and we got ourselves an entire set of Heritage Still. All of their cookware has 5-ply construction, which gives you superior heat distribution and retention when cooking. They also offer a lifetime warranty, which is really hard to find nowadays. Their cookware is versatile for all cooktops. We have a gas range and we absolutely love the way our Heritage pans heat up. They're chemical-free, oven-safe, easy to clean, and Heritage Still is committed to sustainability. They use environmentally conscious practices when producing their cookware. For listeners of the podcast right now, you can save 10% on your order. Head over to heritagestill.us/Steph and Craig, and don't forget to use the code Steph and Craig at checkout to save that 10%. What's some advice that you would give somebody that's either choosing that or thinking about that, or maybe had just recently chosen that decision to go no contact with a family member?
Well, it's a very heavy decision, I think. You're kind of mourning a relationship with people who are physically still here, but for whatever reason, that connection is gone. And I guess I would say allow yourself the space to sit with all of the emotions as they come up, because I have felt everything from anger and sadness to grief and resentment and joy and excitement. I think going into it understanding that it's not a solution necessarily, it's just kind of a decision that'll help you to maybe start to heal and to gain some perspective. I think for me, no contact was really about distance, because I felt like I couldn't put the work in and heal in a way that would be sustainable for me if I was still maintaining these unhealthy relationships, because it can be so easy to just slip back into those old ways of thinking when that relationship is still present. And so, yeah, I would say just kind of allow space for all of these different emotions, and to be patient with yourself, because you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. And like we talked about earlier, whether you journal or you have kind of these moments that you go back to, there's nothing wrong with reminding yourself of why you made this decision, of having those kind of key points. And probably lastly is to just try to surround yourself with people who will be there for you regardless of what you do. Because I think going no contact, I think it can be followed by a lot of change. Personally, a lot of self-discovery. You're trying new things. You're really maybe not too sure of who you are yet outside of a toxic relationship. And I think knowing that even if you have, one or two people that will kind of stick with you, and if you want to go and do something, they'll be there. Don't isolate yourself too much, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I think that support's a really, really big key component, right?
Mm-hmm.
And healthy support, safe support, people that are definitely, they're not criticizing the decision. They're not judging you. They're very much just in the space of supporting that decision and supporting what you're doing from a loving place. That was a huge key thing for me. When you also mentioned the variety of emotions that come up, right? Mm-hmm. It is grief. It's grieving somebody that, a relationship, a dynamic, an experience, a connection that kind of still exists, but it doesn't anymore because of a decision that you've made. But one of the things that I have found really difficult as well, and it's interesting that it's difficult, is joy. Like it's hard for me to allow myself to be happy. Mm-hmm. And I have found that recognizing that right now in my life, I'm, probably some of the most happiest times that I've ever had. I feel happy a lot. I feel full of joy and grateful. And there's just a ton of gratitude for where I'm at in life right now. And that wasn't always, I don't know if when I say it wasn't safe to feel, I think a lot of times, especially earlier on growing up and everything like that, you're so, or at least I was so emotionally connected to my mom that, whatever her emotional state was what my emotional state was. I was just mirroring whatever she was feeling and wherever she was at. And so it was challenging for me to finally get to the point. And I truthfully just took that mirroring process and placed it on all the different relationships that I was in. So eventually it became the same thing with Stephanie, where it was like, if Stephanie was in a bad mood, I'm in a bad mood. If Stephanie's having a bad day, we're having a bad day, all of that kind of stuff. But getting to the point where it's like, wait a minute, like I'm not in a bad mood. I feel really good about myself. I'm happy. I like the decisions that I'm making in my life, and things are going really well. And then just giving myself permission to feel that, like to feel the joy, to feel the happiness, to be in this space, because so much of a decision like that, of going no contact with somebody, like you said, it's a big, heavy decision. And the weight of it, it's like it's got huge ripples, right? And those ripples last for a really long time. And sometimes it's hard to be happy when there's another narrative telling you that you should be sad, or another voice inside of your head saying, yes, but, right? So I think that's a big thing for me that I've noticed.
Yeah. It's really nice when you do start to allow yourself to feel that joy and excitement, though. And I think, for me, because it's very similar, a lot of that has come, even feeling good about my decision to go no contact, has come in recognizing my own progress, and being faced with an experience that in the past I know would have made me very uncomfortable. I would have known how to manage it. It would have been overwhelming. And kind of being able to face something like that now, not necessarily full on 100% with confidence, but much better than I have in the past. And recognizing that, like, I would have done this, and like, here I am. I'm feeling okay. We're moving through it. Like you might start to see, and, like I said, no contact isn't kind of a one size fits all answer to healing is a journey. And I think that's just one step of it. But I think removing yourself from that environment and from those relationships, it kind of allows you the space to start to become more attuned with yourself and reflect on your own behavior. And when you start to see those little steps forward, that's so rewarding, where it's like undeniable that, okay, what I'm doing is working, because this thing that used to be so scary to me, it's not as scary anymore, and that for me is so much motivation to just keep going, because it's like, I can do this.
Babe, you've had a huge awareness of that lately, where it's like you're doing way more stuff now than ever before, right?
Yeah.
You're way less scared about doing things that used to totally freak you out.
Yes. Doing those, it's that finding yourself in that, being able to set boundaries, pushing yourself against the comfort zone. And you catch yourself doing things now. It's like, there's so many times I'm catching myself with just doing the thing that I would never have done from, like, oh my gosh, I would have never been able to do this before. And it's such a stark contrast that it really, really stands out. And yeah,
wow,
I'm seeing that.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I just, when you just said that, it reminded me of something that you said earlier about change and feeling comfortable in change, because obviously with self-discovery, there are going to be a lot of things that you're trying for the first time. And it is kind of like a time for you to turn a lot of your attention and focus inwards, which can be challenging within the context of a relationship. And that was definitely something that I experienced too, feeling like, well, if I've never done this thing before and now I want to try it, I'm not even sure if I want to try it or if I'm going to like it, but is it worth it? Because what if I do, and then now I'm a different person and I'm different than who you knew, and now you don't love me anymore? There's so much that goes into, there's so much strength, I think, that it takes to kind of make that commitment to yourself, and communication with a partner to kind of express these different things and to feel safe enough to do them without feeling like you're putting your relationship, sort of in a compromising position.
Yeah. Casey, what we're always pushing ourselves, probably too much at times, definitely too much at times, but towards, like we're always peeling back the layers of the onion. We're always going deeper, always looking for more. So there's always like this leading edge of discomfort when it comes to our healing, whether it be some new awareness that we have, or some new technique, or some new term, or somebody says something. Like there's so many times where somebody says something and it might be something that you've heard 1,000 times, but it just lands in your ears differently. And suddenly you feel like, what is the edge for you right now in your healing? Like where are you at with it? Where are you kind of stretching and growing? What's new for you in your space right now when it comes to this journey?
That's a great question. I think currently I am kind of, not long ago, I was kind of like faced with a situation where I was going to be introducing someone new into my life, like a new friend. And I realized how protective I was of myself, of being open to new relationships. Because, after moving out of my parents' house and ultimately kind of losing those relationships, the separation anxiety that I was dealing with led to me losing my 3 closest friendships also. And so I think I became really reserved in who I allowed in my life. I think my inner circle was very small, and the people who were there had been there for a while. And with that comes so much. I'm wondering, how to not play too much into their mood or try to figure out how they're feeling, because I don't know them yet. I have to get to know them. And what if we want to go and do this thing? It kind of introduces this level of unpredictability, I guess, that wasn't there when you introduce someone new. And so I think I'm currently kind of allowing myself, or trying to allow myself, to be open to welcoming new relationships in my life. And I think also just like taking little steps to do things for myself. Because, early on, especially in my husband and my relationship, a lot of the things that I was personally interested in, if he wasn't also interested in them, I just stopped doing them, because I felt like, I had to take on his interests as my own. And any time that I spent on me was selfish and might result in something negative. And so now, something as simple as, my husband's going to go and do something, and I'm going to sit here with both my headphones on and like listen to a podcast on my own. doing things like that, and for me, it's practice where it's like, I have to just do it to show myself that it's okay and that nothing bad is going to happen afterwards. And so I think I've been taking little steps, I guess, towards openness in relationships and also just towards individuality.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
That's way cool.
Thanks.
And it sounds like you are doing a fantastic job at that, because as you said before, you were in a space with different groups of friends and you caught yourself being yourself.
Yeah.
And you're like realizing you're being yourself no matter who you're with. And that is such a strength. And it's really showing how much work that you've done, how amazing you're doing. Like that's
Thank
a really
you.
big deal.
Thank
It's a
you
really
so
big
much.
deal. Thank you for sharing all this.
Oh my gosh,
I
thank you guys
guess.
so much for inviting me. Like I feel like conversations like this are so important, because it's something that you can really become accustomed to, especially when you're younger, that it just becomes your normal. And like I was listening to your episode with Tim Fletcher, actually talking about your own personal baggage and then this third set of baggage. And especially for people who are in relationships, like understanding that the problems that you guys have with each other don't just stem from each other. Like they go deeper than that. And I think for me, one of the ways that I've been able to unpack all that has been through perspective that I've gotten from other people and information. And I think, for us to be able to put information out there and to share our own experiences, I think about a younger version of myself. If I had seen something like this at 14, 15, like that would have opened my eyes so much earlier. And so, yeah, I think it's amazing what you guys are doing, that you have a format for this and are creating this community. It's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we sure love it. It's one of those things where our goal is always to just kind of hold up the mirror and share our experience and what we've gone through in hopes that people resonate and hear on their end as well, right? Because I think that we're talking a lot about like emotional maturity and through the lens of parents that are emotionally mature. And I mean, I'm not, right? I'm in the journey of learning how to become an emotionally mature person, a person that's securely attached, a person that is okay and comfortable with being alone, all of these kind of different things. And I think that the reality is it's not just like, oh, parents might be emotionally immature or people or somebody that you're in a relationship with. I think by and large, society as a whole, the maturity level of society is incredibly low. Right. The ability to connect to and feel and express and acknowledge emotions is incredibly low. And that's the thing that I think conversations like this and podcasts like yours and being able to show up on social media in the way that you do, I think that's the impact that it's giving. Is it's putting information out there. It's giving people a different thing to hear and listen to and to understand that, there just needs to be way more of. And the more there is, the more as a whole, hopefully everything kind of rises up and people can start to have some of that emotional maturity out in the world. And then the world changes over time.
Yeah, I completely agree. It makes you feel better about yourself and it makes your relationships with other people better. I feel like it's such a foundational part of who we are. And the more that we can learn those things, and how to have empathy for other people, that's another thing that healing has really taught me. I have so much more empathy for people than I ever have because I like to experience firsthand, like, wow, this is all the stuff that I've gone through. These are the mistakes that I've made, It's like you realize that you have no idea what people are going through or have gone through or where they're at in their healing journey. And it's just so important to be patient with people, and to be understanding and create a space that is safe to make mistakes and to look yourself in the mirror and to say, hey, I was wrong and I did this. But now, as long as you're making an effort to get better, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Casey, this has been so wonderful.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something, babe?
It just like sparked something that, because there's always all this self-reflection. There's something that we're looking at always. And luckily there's plenty of things for us to look at and review on, but something you just like, you sparked with that, and it's safe to make mistakes. It's safe to make mistakes. And that is something that I have been trying to drill in my brain, my heart, my body for so long, because it does not feel safe to make mistakes. And I am really, really difficult on myself still, even though I allow myself to make, I'm doing like mountains. I've come so far, but there's still so much of that internal. And I was writing out some things that were coming, and I'm proud of you, Steph, came out in my writing. It came out and it was like, oh, it was a pause moment where I felt that. And because I was just in flow, I was typing as fast as I was thinking, and I was just in this flow, and that little thing snuck out. And so I'm like, that's my mantra for today. And that's going to be my mantra for a while. I'm going to say it over and over and over throughout the day. I'm going to say it when I get a drink of water. I'm going to say it when I catch myself doing something good. I'm going to say it when I catch myself messing up. I said it so many times today in pickleball. I'm like, I'm proud of you, Steph. I'm proud of you, Steph. It's not working. My last 2 games were like first day on the, I'm proud of you, Steph. And it was just so neat that, because I'm saying it to myself now from so much practice, from a place of love, from a place of like authenticity, as before it used to be, I was trying to just say the things, and my body was like, you don't mean that. You're not really proud of me. So just hearing that's safe to make mistakes, and how that's tying in on where you're at. And I invite people who are listening maybe just to get curious with that one too. What would it be like if you allowed yourself to make mistakes? What would it be like to allow yourself the beauty of making mistakes and learning? What would it be like if what's on the other side of allowing yourself to not be perfect? And sometimes that is so, so, so hard, especially when we've had the experiences we've had. So I'm proud of you. I'm proud of I invite that people. Anyways, yeah. I didn't think I was going to share that. So
I'm proud of you
kind of
too.
messy. Thank you. It came out kind of messy, but it just clicked on so much of what you said, like allowing yourself to make mistakes, and like, yes, they get to be fun.
Yeah. Life is messy sometimes. You have to try things and you have to mess them up. And the thing that I always take from it is, as long as I learn something from it, then it wasn't entirely a negative, and I love that. It's either a positive experience or a learning experience. I feel like that's kind of how I've been trying to look at it, because it is uncomfortable to allow yourself to be seen trying and to not perform the way that you hope to. But again, through practice, if you do it and you realize that it's safe, then you can keep doing it.
Casey, you're such a light.
Yes, you are.
You're such a gift. I just absolutely love you. It's so nice to chat. I love all of your content online. I think you're doing such good stuff. Wow. Do you have anything you want to throw out? Anything you want to share? Anything that's coming up?
Well, we've got a new episode of It's Not Normal coming out on Thursday. We've got 2 episodes left this season, and yeah, I mean, other than that, you can just check back for daily videos on Instagram and all of that. I just, similar to you.
It's Big Sis Casey everywhere, right?
Yeah, Big Sis Casey everywhere. And yeah, I think I just always kind of want to tell people that you can do this, allow yourself to sit with that discomfort and be patient with yourself, because healing is a process. It's a long journey, and yeah, stick with it.
It's awesome. Well, thank you so much. We have a tagline that we end every episode with.
Yes, we do.
Go ahead, baby.
I'm going to start it off.
Just say it all.
No, I'm going to do
I'm proud of you, Steph. Do it.
We do it together. We do it together. Expect the best.
Plan for the greatest.
That's awesome.
Wait and see, you and me. We were meant to be.
We want to make something perfectly clear. This podcast is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as a substitute for professional advice. We're sharing with you our own personal experiences and insights, things we have found to be helpful on our healing journey. But we are not licensed therapists. If you need help, it's important to seek out a qualified professional. Remember, we believe that we all do better when we heal together. See you soon.